Okay, we are live.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Senator Mary Washington, a Senate Chair, along with Delegate Ariana Kelly, who's the House Chair of the Joint Committee on Children, Youth, and Families. I'm calling us to order for our Wednesday, November 10th meeting. Before we get started, I'd like to have all the members that are here introduce yourselves or just say you're present. I see, or else I guess I'll start with my co-chair, Delegate Kelly.
Kasi napaka-weird naman na to.
And if you're not, if I could just say, if you're not speaking, thank you. There you go.
Tell you that I'm super.
Okay, Delegate. All righty, great. So how about this? I'll start with the senators and then you can pick up the delegates. I believe I see Senator Sidnor. Okay. And are they out? Great. I see Senator Chair Nancy King. Good to see you, a former Senate Chair of this committee. There's Senator Shelley Hebbleman. Great to see you all again today. Who else is here? This is Alpha. Oh, good. My Senator Malcolm Augustine, Prince George's County. And I think that's all of our senators. Okay, Delegate.
All right. Hi, Delegate Ariana Kelly. I see Delegate Stephanie Smith is on with us today. I see, looks like Delegate Sue Krebs, Delegate Shanika Henson, our new Vice Chair, Vanessa Atterbury, Delegate Atterbury. Is there anyone I'm missing? I know that Delegate Eric Ebersol has a conflict, so he has sent his staff to be with us today. Thanks, everybody.
And joining us now is the Senator Carozza, just joined us. Good to see you, Senator.
Good to see you.
Okay, today.
Oh, wait, Senator, when I introduced Delegate Atterbury, I said our new Vice Chair, and what I meant to say was our new Chair. Very important distinction of the Ways and Means Committee. So congratulations, Chair Atterbury. Sounds nice to hear.
Thank you.
Very good, good. All right. So listen, we've got a lot to go over today and some really important issues. I'm going to just give an overview of our agenda, and then Delegate Kelly is going to fill in some other very important issues that this committee has been working on. So first, we're going to hear from MSDE and talk specifically around some challenges for childcare, issues before and after childcare. His Chief of Staff, Ari Ari is here to discuss childcare providers' challenges and licensing problems, update on childcare assets and deserts. We're going to hear from Justin Dayhoff, who's the Associate Superintendent of Finance, Planning and Operations, and then Stephen Hicks. Then we're going to hear from our childcare community, many people who represent our childcare community from our Maryland State Childcare Association, the Maryland State Family Childcare Association, directors of some childcare facilities in a number of our counties, and some owners of our childcare facilities. We're also going to hear from our business and nonprofit communities. And I think this connection about the importance, and certainly we've heard this through COVID, about the importance and the vital role that childcare plays in our economy, right? And the need to really bolster our childcare availability. So we're going to hear from a number of stakeholders in that space. And then finally, although we're not voting on our policy recommendations to our standing committees, we will hear from a couple of folks who will talk about some policy recommendations and solutions. And then at the end, we'll have just a little bit of conversation if we want, and then some closing remarks. So with that, Delegate Kelly, take it away.
Thank you, Senator Washington. I just wanted to touch on two things. One, in the childcare space, just to give us a little bit of context to the conversation we're having today. We have heard some reports that some of the relief checks have bounced and that scholarship payments have been really difficult for people to get. That it's been hard to get a hold of the Office of Child Care at times when these challenges are arising. So I'm excited that we have folks here today who can answer questions about this. About 500 child care providers in Maryland Maryland have closed their doors since the pandemic started. We have millions and millions of dollars that are left undistributed. We know that the Build Back Better bill will likely have a significant investment in childcare. So we want to make sure that we're getting things right and doing them right. So I think we all on this committee have been working for a number of years to invest, particularly in the scholarship program. We want to make sure that that's working to the best of its capacity, but also make sure that all of the extra money that we're going to be investing in childcare is being used the way we need it to be used. So that's on the childcare space. Just a pivot to last month's meeting, if everybody remembers, after last month's meeting, which was on October 6th, there was actually an article in the Washington Post on October 9th talking about some of the issues that we were talking about in terms of home and community-based services for long-term care. So Chair Washington and I worked with committee staff to draft a follow-up letter to Secretary Schrader and Deputy Secretary Hsu, following up on some of those questions we didn't get answered, and particularly asking about the questions raised again in that October 9th Washington Post article that many of you have reached out to us about. The title of that was "She's Desperate to Get Home Care for Her Mom in Maryland, 21,000 are on the wait list." So keep an eye out for a response to that. We're looking forward to that. I think that letter is going out today. And with that, I will hand it back to Co-Chair Washington.
Okay, thank you, Delegate. So let's hear now from MSD. Superintendent Chowdhury is not able to attend, but he does share our interest and commitment. But we will hear from Marikana. I got it, Chief of Staff.
Good afternoon, and yes, I apologize that my name is such a challenge. Okay, things just changed, but you can still hear me, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, good afternoon, Chair Washington and Chair Kelly and committee members. It is so great to be with you here, virtually at least. And we really appreciate you giving MSTE the opportunity to share an update on childcare and on after school and out of school during the pandemic with the Joint Committee. Your support and interest has certainly been extremely valuable in moving forward with our goals and ensuring that our youngest learners and their families are thriving. Before we dive in, a couple of quick housekeeping pieces. You do have a mix of new and familiar faces here from MSTE today. So I am Ari Amerikaner. I'm the new Chief of Staff at the agency. So new is a keyword. I've been here approximately 7 weeks. So we will certainly do our best to answer questions and we'll get back to you where we can't in a moment. With me today, Justin Dayhoff, Assistant Superintendent of Financial Planning, Operations and Strategy, and Stephen Hicks, Associate Superintendent of Early Childhood. And then one last note that the slide deck we are going to walk through today has been very slightly updated since the version you were set in advance, just to respond to a little bit of additional of interest expressed from the committee staff. So thank you, Anne, for that. But I'm told you'll get the updated version soon. And it's really just minor updates and a little bit of reorganization. So no surprises here. Okay, Anne, are you controlling? Can you go to the next slide, please?
Yes, yeah, I'm controlling it. So yeah, just let me know when to do next slides and all that.
Okay, next slide now would be great. Thank you. Okay, so we're gonna try to get through a bunch of stuff quickly today, but the first several of these agenda items are data reviews. So we want to look at data on operating status of licensed childcare providers, participation rates in the childcare scholarship program, childcare availability and need, including Childcare Deserts in Maryland. I want to review a bit of data on out of school programming, and then switch from a data dive into a review of relief funding for childcare, as well as some of the out of school programming and grants that we've been issuing from Maryland State Department of Education in recent months. And then we'll switch to a bit of a look ahead, where we are going, where we are headed, what we hope we can do in response to some of the concerns that you mentioned at the opening, and make sure that we're continuously improving and working to ensure that all young families in Maryland have what they need to thrive. It is certainly a near and dear topic for me as a parent of a 4-year-old and a 3-year-old. So I viscerally feel this need myself. And then we'll do some next steps and questions and comments. We do have some additional sort of detailed slides that we've put at the end after our next steps and questions and comments with some updates on some of the federal funds. So if it becomes of interest in our Q&A, we can go there. And if not, we can just leave those in the interest of time for your review after. So with that, unless there's any questions before we dive in, I think I'd like to just hand it over to my colleague Justin to take us through the data. And Anne, if you could take us to the next slide, that'd be great. Thanks.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. First conversation around data here is with regard to looking big picture at the difference in total licensed childcare providers between January 2020, shortly before the pandemic, and November 2021, the start of this month. Before we talk about the impact of the pandemic, it's important, I think, to contextualize where we were leading into the pandemic. And so just to note here, before we actually look at these data, between FY16 and FY18, and that's July 1 to June 30, lines with our school years, there were 629 fewer providers, licensed providers in the state. So we were already declining slightly year to year in licensed providers in the state. That being said, the data here make clear that in the span of a year, the pandemic certainly accelerated the closure of childcare providers. In fact, between January 2020 and November 2021, Maryland had 751 fewer open licensed childcare providers. That's a 9.5% decrease in that time. The distribution of that change across the jurisdictions is not even. And so what you're looking at in the data here on the right side of your screen are how those changes break down across the different local education agencies or local jurisdictions within the state of Maryland. Prince George's had the largest net decrease of 141, whereas Kent County, for example, actually had an increase of 2 childcare providers who opened. One thing I want to caveat the data on this slide and the next couple of slides with that we're looking at here is this is a net total of changes to our licensed operators, right? And so what we're looking at here is not necessarily the number who closed offset by the number who opened. It's not, we don't have that level of granularity. So what we're actually talking through here is in total across providers who both closed and reopened, or somebody who might have never been opened in the first place, who just started a new business. Those are included in our counts. So when we're talking about a net difference in childcare providers, 751 fewer, that includes any childcare providers who might have opened during this period as well. And can you go to the next slide for us, please? Thank you so much. So the next question then is, okay, well, let's dive into how that looks across the different types of childcare providers, right? And so the biggest impact in terms of closings, as far as childcare provider type, comes with the registered family childcare providers. Those constituted 81% of the closings, the total number of childcare providers closed that we saw. That's 609 fewer family childcare centers. Worth noting, of course, that there's certainly impact here across the other types, right? This certainly had impact on licensed childcare centers, on letter of compliance facilities, large family home childcare centers. On average, those constitute fewer of the licensed childcare provider share in the state anyway, but nonetheless, the impact of closure is felt across all of the different types here. And in fact, so just for broader context, we had 7,944 total coming into the pandemic. We're at 7,193 now. If we could go to the next slide, please, Anne. Thanks again. This starts to get at the question of, okay, well, how did they come back? And when did they come back? And where did they come back? And so what we're looking at here on the left side of the graph you see are the number of providers in thousands. On the right side, the other axis you see, the other vertical axis, is the percent of providers. And I'll walk through both of those here accordingly to read it. But the big takeaway from this graph is in May of 2020, 47, so shortly after the pandemic had begun and right when we started allowing childcare centers to reopen under the new health and safety guidelines associated with COVID protocol, 47.6% of the total pre-pandemic licensed providers were open. That number rose to 88.6% here in November 2021. However, that number slightly understates how many providers are actually open. As I mentioned in the previous slides, we had 751 providers close, right? So when we actually account for the total number of providers who are even available to be open today, who are licensed, we're at 97% open now So 97% of eligible licensed providers are open and operating today. And Andy, could you go ahead and go to the next slide, please? So part of this next question then goes down to the children, right? So how is this impacting, or what sort of impacts are we seeing on the children who take advantage of and who are a part of these childcare opportunities? One way that we measure and have data on that is through the Childcare Scholarship Program. And so this slide looks at the data we have for the count of children who were participating in the Childcare Scholarship Program. Again, we're looking at a timeline here from April 2020 to September 2021. So right at the start of the pandemic through our first quarterly report here where we have those data again. What you'll notice here with these data, and it's kind of an interesting trend really, the participation fell 22.5%. So it's a dramatic fall, of course, between 2020 and April 2020 and December 2020. What's interesting is that count then began to remain steady in December 2020 onward into September 2021, which maps to the previous slide where we're starting to see more providers back open. Some of those spots and pieces are available. This does, though, also spur additional questions, right? So when we talk about availability of open providers, it's not just a question of how many, it's a question of where those providers often are. And this leads to questions about what we call childcare deserts, right? So childcare deserts are areas where there might be a lot of children who need care in some way or other, but there might not necessarily be providers geographically located there to do it, right? So that can get hidden sometimes when we talk about these big picture numbers about where and how these spots are. So, and if you could go to the next slide. This overlays provider availability data with actual census data in regard to where children live and where spots are available for them to attend. And as you can see here across the state, really across all of our jurisdictions, we often have more than one child per regulated childcare space, which would be technically an inadequate, right? Spacing for them because they wouldn't have the opportunity to have a spot in an available childcare space. That being said, it's worth drilling down into this further. And so, Anne, if you could go to the next slide. There's nuance here, right? I mean, it's policy. There's nuance with everything, I suppose. And as we look at this, you know, even across the state, you see within jurisdictions themselves, right? Adequate supply can only be found in some of them. But most jurisdictions have areas where there is adequate supply, but most jurisdictions also have areas where there is not adequate supply. You know, especially when we talk about Maryland here, where we've got 24 county-wide jurisdictions, which are often geographically very large. Drilling down further, and if you could go one more for me. Thank you so very much. When we look within jurisdictions, we can, and it becomes even more important to take this conversation about childcare deserts and understanding what we know about where children need care and where care exists in order to appreciate how and where the data tell us these childcare centers need to operate. So this is just an example. This is from childcaredeserts.org. And so you can also feel free to explore this as a resource if you want to look at other jurisdictions. But this gives you some insight into how childcare supply relates to those spaces. And then again, of course, it becomes important to disaggregate this on which children. You know, are we talking about low-income children? Are we talking about children from underserved populations, right? And how do those children and subgroups map to these pieces of care as well? And so I point you to this slide as a reference, because if you actually go to this site, you can also do that drill down if you'd like some extra data on how this presents. Tightly coupled with the availability of childcare is the availability of before and after care, right? And I know that's one of the guiding questions of the conversation today. We don't have a ton of data here in Maryland specifically, so I'm going to start kind of broadly and winnow down more specifically into Maryland to say that, you know, what we saw during the pandemic is, you know, disparate impact on children, particularly by income status and the availability of after-school program participation. So the graph right here is showing us that programs that served mostly higher income children were almost twice as likely as programs that served mostly low income children to report being physically open. Right, and so that obviously has an impact on whether or not children who come from low-income families have access to childcare if those aren't open. Moreover, federally funded after-school programs, particularly ones located in high poverty neighborhoods, were the ones that were most likely to be closed when that first summer of the pandemic hit. And as you can see from our slide earlier, we're getting close, but we're still getting everybody reopened. What that looks like in Maryland, the After School Alliance conducted a study. Again, this was both a national study, but then they pulled some data on Maryland specifically. It said in 2019, if they had the option, 253,000 children would have been enrolled in a summer program if one were available to them, right? So the demand is certainly there. To that end, and if you could go to the next slide, we have, through some of the COVID relief efforts, as well as through existing grant programs, tried to attend to this. And I'll speak to that now, and then I'll shortly, right after this, pass it over to Stephen to continue. But for specifically here in the 2021-2020 school year, the department awarded grants in 4 programs, of which attend directly to the before and after school, the out of school time care. Those grants were all competitive. And so we do know that not everybody who applied for those received those. However, worth noting here, the 21st Century Community Learning Centers, as well as the ARP, Emergency Elementary and Secondary School Relief Fund, will be opening up another round of grant applications because we do have remaining funds for that. It's just that in the first round, not everybody met the minimum requirements that we are required by law or by the grant award notices that we receive for these in order to provide those out to those LEAs. And so we're supporting them to try and help revise and resubmit those applications and get those in accordingly. Though, again, worth noting, these buckets here are not the only sources of COVID relief funding, of which we're trying to attend to childcare. And so I'll pass to Stephen to continue that discussion, particularly the other federal buckets.
Great. Next slide. Thank you very much, Justin. And thank you, Ari, Senator Washington, Delegate Kelly, the entire committee. Thank you for your ongoing support for early childhood. In the 4 years that I've been here at MSDE, the legislature has been so supportive of all of our childcare activities, especially the childcare scholarship program, helping so many families to meet the cost of childcare. So there are 3 funding packages from the federal government that we've received to support the childcare system in Maryland. The first, the CARES Act, those funds were used for grants for programs that had been open at the beginning of the pandemic, also to provide PPE materials and support, as well as to pay for the essential personnel childcare programs for those frontline workers during the pandemic. And that was for school age and also children younger than school age. The second package was used to continue to pay for the essential personnel childcare program, as well as to distribute $60 million in grants last May to childcare programs to help them stabilize and sustain their businesses and make up for losses during the first months of the pandemic. The final, well, although I hope it's not final to tell you the truth, package that we received from the federal government, we received $502 million, and that's in 2 different buckets. One is for childcare stabilization and relief funding, but also general funding of the Childcare Development Fund of $193 million, which I'll talk about in a moment, that covers supporting parents with meeting the costs of childcare. It also supports the workforce and the quality of childcare programs. So far in the ARPA funding of this first about $309 million for childcare stabilization, we've distributed $155 million to over 5,100 childcare providers. And we are continuing to do quality checks to make sure that everyone gets the funding for which the formula would entitle them to get. Originally, we had to have baseline of $15,000 for every family child care provider and center-based provider, with an additional $300 per licensed slot that they have. because there were fewer applicants, we raised that to $500 per slot. The federal government was strongly recommending that states get out at least 50% of their funds by December, mid-December. We've definitely exceeded that, and we plan to have additional rounds in the next year. The federal government also required that states provide rolling applications, and we saw already from the first 60 million to this 155 million that we have additional applicants. So we're continuously trying to improve our outreach to providers and provide technical assistance so we can get as much of this funding out to every single licensed childcare provider that is eligible. Next slide. So some of the processes that we're doing to support our childcare scholarship program and the impact of the pandemic on that are through a portal. There's a portal for providers and there's a portal for families. And we believe this will improve the experience that providers have and also that families have as they apply for childcare funding. And we're fortunate enough to be pretty far along now on this portal, and we expect early next year for this to go live. And this is at a perfect time because as parents and guardians of young children are returning to the workforce, they're now suddenly going to be re-entering the need for childcare scholarships or newly entering for childcare scholarships. And they need to go through the application process. And through this portal, we're going to simplify that for the families. And as Justin mentioned, our drop in the number of families participating and children participating in the scholarship program, we expect to rise exponentially, and we want to be able to provide that excellent customer service for those families, as well as for the providers who are accepting the scholarship funds. Next slide. Now, the portal will also help with our next distribution of grant funding for childcare providers. And we hope this will be a better experience for providers as they seek additional funding to stabilize their businesses, these small businesses. We also want to use the portal to get a better understanding of the effects of the pandemic. For example, which programs are closed, which are open, which are newly opened, make sure that all the programs that are opened have signed assurances. They will follow our health and safety guidance that we developed with the Maryland State Department of Health based on the CDC guidance. And that when a program may have to close for 3 days or longer, that information is logged immediately so that we can work with our partners like Maryland Family Network and Johns Hopkins University that uses the Maryland Excels website to get that information to parents. So they're going to programs that are actually open and have spaces that they can be offering those families. Next slide. Now, the second part of this relief funding from ARPA for the child care system in Maryland is $193 million. And again, those funds have a very flexible use. And Mr. Chaudhry wanted us to have a lot of public input on how to use those funds. So about 4 weeks ago, we held 3 town halls to solicit input from stakeholders, from families, from providers, from early childhood educators, and of course from legislators. I hope that some of you were also on those town halls. We got a lot of wonderful ideas around these big areas about expanding the supply of childcare, improving the payment policies that we have, when parents seek relief and assistance with paying for childcare through the scholarship program, expanding access, increasing mental health supports, providing supports for vaccinations, and expanding the way in which we communicate with our communities, especially those that are not traditionally getting access to the Child Care Scholarship Program in bringing them in and making sure that they understand the full process of how to apply for those funds. Our next steps are in this plan that we are constructing based on the feedback we received from the public is to get budget amendment approval from the Department of Budget and Management, and then it will go to the Legislative Committee and then the governor's desk to sign. And then we hope to begin implementing this plan as soon as possible, continuing to work with stakeholders to make sure that it meets their needs, the needs of the childcare community. Next slide. Some of our next steps also include implementing this plan and making sure those investments are effective in stabilizing our childcare system. So not only the providers that have been open during this pandemic, but supporting new providers to open or providers that opened after April of this year, which was the deadline imposed by Congress of the eligibility for the childcare programs. We also will continue to hold listening sessions from the childcare community so that we can understand the changing dynamics of the pandemic and how it affects families, how it affects providers, and how it affects early childhood educators. And then we will continue to coordinate future investments and the implementation of the ARPA plan with the implementation of Blueprint for Maryland's Future, and continuing to plan for possible future investments, for example, through the budget reconciliation that Congress is debating right now. So at this time, we are open for any questions or comments from the committee, and we would love to be able to respond to those.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I see Delegate Krebs right off the bat. Thank you. And again, thank you for this. I will have some questions, particularly on the slides later.
Thank you. And thank you, Steve. I've been having these questions for weeks, and I now have you in front of me to ask. One of the big issues we have is with school closures due to COVID, with the quarantining and the closures. And I want to first of all know who's responsible. I've seen your policy manual. I've read it, but there's some trickiness because it's bringing a lot of uncertainty to parents. They've got to go to work and their school's closed down or their classroom shut down for 2 weeks and quarantining. So the question becomes, are we tracking these closures? It seems like you are. And who do they go to? Is it the health department? Is it MSDE? And how do we give more certainty based on science to these families that need to go to daycare and now their school's shut down for 2 weeks or they're supposed to be quarantined?
Great. So thank you, Delegate Krebs, for all of your emails and helping us to link with your constituents and be able to respond and solve particular individual issues. So I wanted to make sure I said that right up front. For childcare, we work closely with the Maryland Department of Health, and then each jurisdiction has their local health department that makes those decisions on childcare if there is an outbreak. Now, I don't work specifically with the Maryland Department of Health on school closures, which was to your question. I'm not sure if Ari would be able to answer that, but I'm
talking about daycares and not school. I'm talking about daycare school closures. I'm sorry.
Okay, sure.
Specifically daycare.
Sure. So all of the recommendations that are in our health and safety guidance, we hope that childcare programs will follow. Those are recommendations. Those are recommendations that we want them to follow so that there is not an outbreak of COVID in their family childcare home or center-based program. Now, when an outbreak occurs, the childcare facility is to notify their local health department. The local health department makes an assessment of the situation based on the facts, and then they decide whether the program should be quarantined, so a quarantine of maybe one classroom or the entire program, and then they notify us and the licensing specialists so they can be aware of the operating status of the program.
Okay, I can follow up with you offline, but thank you for that. So it's
Sure.
the local health department. Thank you.
Senator Augustine and then Delegate Solomon.
Thank you, Chair Washington. And I just want to thank the presenters for a very comprehensive presentation. As a person who represents Prince George's County, I mean, obviously I was just very shocked by the number that was on the slide, the 169 closures, or I need a better explanation and understanding of what that is. And part of that explanation that I need is what is the base from which that starts from in Prince George's County, just to better understand sort of what the status is. I have a sense of why as well. So if you also could provide some color to some of them, maybe if they're smaller ones where people now have come out of the market. And so now more folks are have their kids at home, which I have experienced quite a bit in my neighborhood. If you could just help me with that, I'd appreciate it.
Sure. Senator Augustine, thank you for your question. And Prince George's County is, of course, one of the larger counties in Maryland. So they also have a majority of our childcare programs, along with a couple other larger counties. I'm just going to respond quickly, and then I'm going to let Justin also respond. But in general, all of those programs that you saw when Justin shared those are self-closures. So those are programs that decided themselves to close or go out of business. And there's a variety of reasons. We have reasons for that. And we have been tracking some of those reasons. Some of them, it was because, of course, at the beginning of the crisis, the pandemic, some businesses, they didn't have clientele to meet operating costs, or they themselves were afraid of contracting the virus and didn't want to remain open and didn't want to continue their business. Other reasons are things like moving out of state, retiring. We are very concerned that the family childcare providers, which are 2/3 of our providers, many of those folks are nearing retirement age. And we need to find a strategy and use a strategy to build up our childcare system. And these are some, and we have lots of strategies that we're implementing right now. And through these ARPA funds, we plan to offer incentives for family childcare and center-based programs, new ones to open up. Now, we can provide additional data for you on some specifics that might be helpful at a later time. But Justin, did you want to add to that?
Absolutely. So just to give you some specifics as to your question, Senator, and in Prince George's County in January of 2020, there were 1,101 total licensed providers. And when we talk about total providers, just to be clear here, that's large family childcare homes, which I believe, Stephen, correct me if I'm wrong, that's 8 to 12 children. And then under 8 is the registered. Okay, great. That includes letter of compliance facilities, licensed childcare centers, and registered family childcare centers. In November of 2021, so this month, that number is 960 total. So just there's a month by month and annual breakout of this in the additional attachments we included of the PDFs for today. So feel free to pull those at any point in time as well throughout the pandemic.
Thank
And
you.
of course,
that really paints a very different picture than what the slide painted. And so I'm grateful that you provided some clarity on that. And just very briefly, you know, Mr. Hicks, you're absolutely right. I think about our community, and we're coming to another basically cycle for a lot of the places and families. And I will share with you that a number of those facilities, the folks who will likely be these next people who run these businesses are immigrants, and many of them are Spanish speakers and other speakers. If there is a way for us to just be thoughtful about outreach in that way for those people to be able to run these small businesses to meet the needs of the kids who are similar in these areas, because as I looked at that heat map, that's what I saw. I would just ask for that. And I also would be happy to be a partner in that. So thank you so much.
And Stephen, if I could just jump in to say, Senator, that is, you will find a real partner, I think, in that focus and that interest in the superintendent, who is very focused on making sure that our outreach is really quite broad and focused on specifically families who maybe don't speak English as a first language, and also underserved and sort of maybe under communicated with families across the state.
Very good. Yeah, thank you, Senator, for that observation and action item. Delegate Solomon.
Thank you, Senator Washington, Madam Chair, and Stephen and Ari, and Justin. It's good to see you, and appreciate that you spent so much time sitting down with me last week. And I know I've got a lot to follow up on. So I really just wanted to say, you know, as I think a little bit of a broken record for some of my colleagues to hear this and for you all, but you know, we really just need to invest, I think, immediately in the workforce. You know, and I'm really excited to see the heat map because I know we had asked in the Joint Chairs report with the budget. I mean, it's one thing to see the number of centers that are open, but it's another thing to understand what kind of vacant seats there are. And I think we'll hear from a lot of providers here today that, you know, just because they're reopened doesn't mean that they're operating at full capacity or that they even have the staff to operate at full capacity. And, you know, just sort of reiterate what we all talked about last week around the systems piece. I mean, I think it's really exciting to hear about the portal. There have been a lot of states that have, I think New Mexico in particular, has been really successful with sort of their portal model. But I think, you know, what I hear a lot from not only the providers, but from the families that I talk with is just the process for getting the scholarship is still really difficult. And I think, you know, I'm glad we'll have some business folks on as well, but, you know, from the chamber, and I was having this conversation just yesterday with a, you know, business leader in our community about, you know, she is just hearing over and over again from her members, you know, that they can't find childcare slots and they can't get childcare to get their workers back in the door and on the job. And so I think the more that we can do to streamline that process, and I'll reiterate again, you have a willing partner. I think for many of us here, from the appropriation side, from the policy side, to get MSDE the resources that they need to make those systems work better and to expedite the process for families, because we all want the same thing at the end. So really appreciate you all being here. Senator Washington and Delegate Kelly, thank you for convening the hearing.
That's great. Isn't that so? Thank you. Senator King.
Hello, everybody. I guess Stephen Hicks, I have a question for you. Is there a way? I know there are a lot of people that just gave up their licenses when they kind of just decided they couldn't afford to even be open, and they kind of cashed it all in. And I don't know if any of those people want to come back and get a license, but I guess what I'm wondering, I'm not looking at lowering standards by any means, but is there a way to streamline the process so that if somebody wanted to get a license and open a child care center, that we could speed that up so that we could get more centers open? Is there a way to do that?
Well, Stephen just texted me to say the internet went out. So we're
Yes.
in, I'm sorry, a moment.
It was that much of a shock to his system.
A virtual challenge. He's logging back on. I apologize
Okay.
for that delay. But certainly understand the intent behind your question. If you want, you can circle back when he gets back on, or I can certainly pass it along.
Go ahead. I'm just looking for an answer. That's all.
Circle back. No, we can circle back with you. I want to be able to consult with Stephen, of course. He's the right person to answer.
Okay.
Well, Senator, if I could just, I think you're right in terms of thinking, absolutely right. It's not about lowering standards, but over the last 2 years with COVID, in a number of professions, you know, we figured out how can we accelerate or provide temporary licenses to allow people to open up, to get started. You know, we do that in education. We had to do it as social work. We just passed in EHE a mechanism to allow social workers to get to work, you know, as they are getting ready to take their exams. So we might need to look for that. And now I've spoken long enough that Steve Hicks is now back.
You probably missed my question.
Give us a real
Hey,
answer.
Stephen.
Hi,
I just want to be sure that we understand that I'm not looking at all at lowering standards. I mean, the safety of our kids is the number one issue, no matter what.
Yep.
But I just think there has to be an easier, streamlined way that we can license people and get more people into the field than what we have been doing. And it may not be possible because there are steps I know that need to be followed, but that's my question.
So I'm sorry, I probably missed the first part of it. My internet went out. But you know, the regulations are what we follow, as well as the federal law. And so we are definitely happy to look at those. We had a committee last spring made up of before and after school providers and childcare providers to look at the before and after school regulations or school age regulations and see if there's some flexibility in there. So they've made some recommendations which are under consideration right now. And we're definitely, I hear your concern. And our goal too is to provide as much childcare as possible, but we also have a charge to ensure the health and safety of the children of Maryland. So that's really primary, but we have a licensing staff that work closely with before and after school programs. When we had the EPIC and EPSA programs, the essential personnel childcare programs, we relied a lot on community-based organizations like the Boys and Girls Clubs, the rec centers, to support us in providing slots while the schools were virtual for those school-age kids so parents could go to school. That was an emergency situation where we had a governor order that gave the flexibility to relax some of those regulations. And then after that ended, we offered and worked with many of those nonprofit organizations to secure licensure. And we are ready and willing to do what it takes to help those organizations become licensed.
Okay. Thanks, Stephen.
Thank you, Senator. And to close out this section, so we'll move on to our providers and really hear how all these policies are operating on the ground. Co-Chair Kelly.
Thank you, Senator Washington. And so I have a three-part question, but the first part was, I hope that the panel from MSDE can stay around in case there's more questions that come up after we hear the provider panel, because I know that there've been some concerns raised. What I heard particularly was maybe there was a vendor, this is part two of the question, maybe a vendor issue in terms of processing the payments for the scholarships and other things, and that hopefully that's being worked on. But if someone from MSDE could address that. And then the second or the third part of my question, actually, I was joined by Senator Eckert in NCSL at the Child Care Forum down in Florida. And two interesting things came up, and you will never hear me say Florida is leading. So don't think I've taken some sort of dramatic political shift here, but they mentioned that in Florida, what they did with their federal money was give each child care worker $1,000 twice. And that, again, I'm not necessarily promoting that idea, but I do think that this committee has talked about the workforce issues, the fact that there's just a disconnect between what we're willing and able to pay childcare workers and what the market demands. So it was an interesting concept. They were certainly bragging about it quite a bit. And then the other idea, which I did think was quite interesting and we might be able to work with in Maryland, was this idea that anybody in the childcare workforce would have presumptive eligibility for their own children in the scholarship program, so that we would make it as employers in the childcare space, we would be able to offer as a benefit to our employees that they would be an automatic participant in the scholarship program. Presumably these folks are all income eligible. We know, unfortunately, what the average wage has to be in order to make this sustainable for families. So I guess a three-part question. Will you guys stick around? I'm sure your answer to that will be yes. Maybe address the vendor issues and other things we might think of doing to really address the workforce component, making it easier to retain good employees and get more folks into this field.
Thank you, Senator Kelly. Did you want me to wait until after the other presentations to address those, or do you want me to address
go ahead.
No, please. Yeah.
And
Okay,
Justin may be able to jump in as well, Stephen, on that.
Yeah.
Sure. So I guess on the first one, yes, I think we're all planning to stick around. So, happy to do that. On part two, a couple of, I think, points of note. This, along with many other of the federal programs that have come out as part of the COVID relief packages were brand new. And so the second that we could get through the process, we essentially, we were able to get, as Stephen said earlier, 155 million of that first package out by November. To contextualize that, only at the time that we opened this up, only 22 states in the entire United States had even opened applications. And we were actually one of the first states in the entire country to get money out to providers. Now, that being said, these are providers who needed those funds. I mean, it was already late when ARPA was enacted in March, right? We understand, we sympathize, and we empathize with that, no doubt about it. And we work diligently to get those dollars out as quickly as we possibly could. And we've learned a lot from that process. And as Stephen mentioned, as we get ready to roll out another round of those in the spring, through that portal experience and through those developments, we anticipate being able to make that a smoother and easier process for those who are applying for those funds, as well as for us to make sure that we can continue through on the data validation and quality checks to make sure that those payments all go out quickly and efficiently to those providers. Again, recognizing this could not happen fast enough, no doubt about it. We did, I think context matters though, and we were one of the first states in the country to do this work. And we are continuing to build on that going forward because we need those providers. We need our kids to have those spots. We need those things to happen. And I'll defer to Stephen for the last part there. Sorry. Sorry.
No, thank you, Justin. I too, Senator Kelly, believe that we need to do more for our workforce. And so part of our plan and what we heard from our town halls was to do just that. So in this budget amendment for the 193 million, we do plan to be able to provide for the childcare workers, whether you're a teacher, whether you're a bus driver, whether you're the cook, the maintenance people at that center, everyone helping to ensure that children are served in safe and educational settings, that they receive some kind of compensation during this very difficult time where they've experienced erratic employment, as you can imagine, with the number of programs that were closed at the beginning of the pandemic and the number of programs that have reopened or newly opened. The employment has been quite erratic. We've also tried to prioritize as an element for our stabilization grants in this first round, point out that these funds should be used and can be used to support your workforce with additional raises or compensation. And we are working on the next round to have a little bit more of elements in it that prioritize and incentivize specific populations to be served, especially infants and toddlers, and also compensation for the workforce. So that is very much on our mind. So I appreciate you bringing it up.
Thank you for that, Delegate Kelly. And Mr. Hicks, if I could just ask for some specificity on this, specifically on the idea of $1,000 or $2,000 incentive, and then also the idea extending the same benefit that we extend faculty in our institutions of higher education, right? We do extend tuition benefits, so to speak. What would that, I think this committee, while we're not a budget committee, a number of members are, it would be interesting. So I guess this is the second part of it. If we could attach a dollar amount, what would it be? If we were to do something like provide as an incentive or as a thank you, $1,000 for each. And then two, what would it cost to provide for the childcare of those who are taking care of our children?
Great,
So,
thank you. Yeah, thank you so much for both of those. And we can definitely follow up with more specifics. Of course, our budget amendment hasn't been approved yet, but those are really great things that we would love to follow up on with you, as well as your and Senator Kelly's idea about the presumptive eligibility. That's definitely something that would have to be explored further, and also look at really an analysis of our workforce, their income, and whether they actually already qualify for the Child Care Scholarship Program. But thank you very much for those suggestions, and we will get back to you on those.
And so I apologize, Senator Benson, I didn't see your hand. I'll let you close out. Are you okay? Okay, because now we're going to hear from the providers. And again, thank you all so much. I know you're working hard and we're excited to get some more work done. So first, we're going to hear from, I believe it's Christina, is that right? With the Maryland State Child Care Association. And then after that, we'll hear from the Maryland State Family Child Care Association.
Great. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, CYF Committee, STEAM Committee, and thank you, MSD, for a wonderful presentation and shedding the light on the landscape and where we are now with childcare and where we've been. Anne, if you want to move to the next slide. I want to again thank the essential childcare community, the workers, everyone, the teachers. Childcare is the backbone of our economy. Childcare is education. As you can see, the information about the 90% of a child's brain is happens before the age of 5, and childcare is essential. It's an industry, and it allows Marylanders to work. And so I want to congratulate them for all that they've done through this pandemic. They deserve, a standing ovation, and I'm proud to represent them. You can go to the next slide. I also wanted to mention, where we're going to talk a little bit about where we are now, where we came from, but I would like to mention I had the pleasure to speak to Webster Yee from the Maryland Department of Health yesterday, the Assistant Secretary, and I wanted to also congratulate our childcare community as over 7,000 are reopened, as we just heard, and only 24 cases of COVID, which is 0.0034. We are doing an excellent job of keeping children safe and healthy. And those recommendations that are updated often, we take those seriously, and we are only required to report those to the local health department. And we will continue to realize what our responsibilities are and do an excellent job before, during, and after this pandemic. So I just want to be sure we recognize that these are private businesses providing a public good, and that, we have gone through 3 rounds of the different types of supports through the federal government, and also, the PPP loans. And I would just like to say that, we are still in survival mode, but in order to move to the next steps and rebuild and recover, we have to get out of the survival mode. So next slide, please. Thanks. And so in the best of times, I'm sure you are aware, Maryland's and nationally, childcare industry margins are razor thin. We face devastating losses and challenges during this pandemic. And as MSD pointed out, we do have 97% of our childcare programs reopened, but only 44% of the programs that have reopened are operating. They're operating under 50% capacity, according to MSD. And that's and you'll hear from some of them how many they're serving right now. Yet the fixed costs remain the same for us, and our expenses have skyrocketed. So, as many goods and services have skyrocketed to make up for the pandemic. And we have over 700 childcare programs that have closed, not just 600 as I have in my slide. So those are sobering numbers. And that equates not only I was hearing MSD, with losing 609 family childcare programs, that's about, they have a capacity for 8 children, that's almost 5,000 slots right there that we've lost, and another 100 plus childcare centers that can take, anywhere from 30 to 100 or 200 children. You're talking tens of thousands of slots that we're losing in Maryland for people that are looking, and you'll hear from the chamber, people that cannot find childcare. And one of the reasons is because of the workforce, and we'll get to that as part of my remarks, as well as my colleagues that will be speaking. So I only just wanted to remind everyone that the average child care center teacher makes $26,054 in Maryland. That's the average salary. And center aide makes $18,000. A family child care provider on average makes $40,000, and a child care center director makes $41,000. That's our workforce. Next slide, please. So, and there's an access and equity issue, especially for, according to the American Center for American Progress, childcare negatively affected communities of color before the pandemic, as parents of color were more likely than their non-Hispanic or white counterparts to experience childcare-related job disruptions. And you'll hear from some of my colleagues with regard to that as well. But we have to act, and we have to act with a lens of equity in rebuilding. Next slide, please. And so childcare is a top 3 expense for households across the country, and in Maryland it's no different. We are spending, I believe, close to 30% of our income on childcare. And so these are averages in Maryland, according to Maryland Family Network Public Policy Manual, center-based childcare, and you can see $304 for infants, $221 for 2-year-olds, and $166, and then family childcare. Those are the tuitions. This is an expense for families. It rivals college tuition. Next slide, please. And so what are our priorities and what do we need to address? We really, as some of our delegates have brought up, the critical workforce shortages have to be paramount. It is part of our priorities agenda for our state association, and it has been for a few years. It's just been exacerbated by the pandemic. And there are many barriers. We need some urgency for these childcare grants. I know that I'm glad to hear about the portal. I was grateful to hear about the opportunity to make sure that we can get this money out to the people that need it quickly, or we're going to lose even more programs. And the childcare scholarship and subsidy, the same thing. We have parents that need to get to work and are waiting long periods of time to be approved and be able to get childcare, and providers that are participating being deterred and considering opting out because they're not getting paid in a timely manner. And then addressing the expansion of public pre-K and the unintended consequences of that through the blueprint. Next slide, please. And so MSCCA has done a workforce survey. I will provide the committee with the full results, but these are just a few slides from our recent survey that we did. And again, we only have access to our smaller membership. We don't have access to all of the emails for every licensed provider, but this was a good snapshot. So this shows that 75% are experiencing workforce shortages. And some of our family childcare providers also took this. So this is sort of inclusive of a number of different types of childcare. Next slide, please. And then one of the other issues is qualified staff. You know, in Maryland, we're required to have specific qualifications to work in a childcare program. And so finding people that meet those requirements have been even more difficult, because they can work at Target or Starbucks or Kohl's for a lot more money per hour than they can for us. Next slide, please. And so ranking some of the barriers, as I spoke about earlier, the number one barrier was qualifications. I mean, just trying to find people that fit into that mold. And then of course, compensation has always been an issue because we're tuition dependent. So in our workforce barriers that we have been addressing in our priorities agenda, we are tuition dependent. And so we can only charge what the market will allow, and parents are already stretched. And then of course, the benefits, we don't offer benefits. A lot of us aren't able to do so. So we would love to have the CYF look at, and some of the delegates consider how we can work towards benefits. And then the pandemic related issues, of course. So, you know, if you have underlying conditions, working with the 0 to 5 community probably isn't in your best interest, or if you're over 50, because, you know, we don't have an immunization. I mean, we don't have vaccines for that age group, and we're just starting to get vaccines for our school age group that we typically work with. Next slide, please. And then how many staff vacancies do you have? You can see 64% that answered have 1 to 5 vacancies. And a lot of our colleagues that I've spoken to can't open classrooms. And so when you hear from the chamber, or you're hearing from your own constituents, there are a lot of people who don't have teachers, so they can't open their classrooms and can't expand. And you'll hear from Carolina, and she'll talk a little bit about that as well. Next slide, please. And so, as I said, MSCCA has worked over the last couple sessions because we've been aware of the workforce issues, critical workforce shortages for longer than the pandemic. They've just been exacerbated by the pandemic as well, as many small businesses have. And so we did have a bill that was sponsored by our own Senator King and Delegate Kelly that passed and was supposed to go into fruition in July 1st, 2021. And, you know, we have talked to MSD. We know that they have a lot of other really important priorities, but, you know, some of these things were to address workforce issues. And so we'd like to see those policies implemented, as well as some of the other issues, you know, worked on with a little more expediency, because they are to address things that are happening past, present, and future. And then, of course, we have been working with MSD, and I know that they have really been supportive of their licensing specialists to help with variances and provisions at the regulatory level to see if we can get more staff into our programs because we aren't able to open our classrooms or continue to serve our communities without a workforce. And so I know that they have been doing that. And I do have a slide in my survey that talks about 50% of the people that took the survey said that they are getting some of that help from the specialists. So that's good to know that, it's on its way in the relief that we need in that area as well. Next slide, please. And so what do we need? We need a critical need for more resources to support parents, right? And we also need quality care. We need to bolster and expand childcare businesses, as we talked about earlier, and to be able to improve the wages and compensation for our workforce. And then we need investments to rebuild a sustainable. I mean, it's great to have 1,000 and 2,000. Like, we want to thank staff. We want to have use our funds wisely, but we also need to have continuous funding. We need state funding as well as federal funding, right? This is one of the richest states in the country. We need to really invest in something that is an industry, which is childcare. It's part of the economy. It's part of commerce. We need to connect the dots, and we haven't done that enough. We need to do this expediently and efficiently and transparently. Next slide. So I wanted to give you a little bit of cost analysis quickly. I'm just going to run through them. This was showing what it costs. So I know we love graphs, right? And some of us prefer those types of easier way to break things down. So this just shows an Anne Arundel County for-profit, smaller, one of my members' programs. Next slide, please. And then this is a breakdown of their losses. So when you take a look at some losses, this is a smaller program. You're losing $180 per slot. You're losing $68,000 in a 6-month period. And I appreciate, listen, we are so appreciative and grateful for all of the support that we've gotten from, the federal level and through our state in these grants. But if you really look at the numbers in a childcare program, and childcare centers provide the most slots, so almost 200,000 slots for childcare. And, if we get $500 per slot and we get 15,000 base, that'll help, but it is not sustainable, at the losses. And it seems like a lot of money, but it's really not a lot of money in business. Next slide, please. This is a nonprofit in Montgomery County, which has much higher cost factors involved. Next slide. And they'll show you their losses, $287 per slot, and a monthly loss of $55,000. So those are things that, when you're shut down or when you're trying to rebuild, we really do have a big problem. And the workforce really is exacerbating that because many small businesses can't find staff, including MSDE, to process their subsidies and grants. Next slide, please. And so this is a quote from Dr. Lisa Herb. She owns 2 centers in Anne Arundel County, and she took the grant. So very grateful for the grants as well. She increased pay scales for her workforce by 20% to fill 14 positions in 2 locations. She had to do so because Kohl's and McDonald's and Sam's were offering more money. And so they're competing for a very small pool, right? And they have to be able to, she doesn't know how long she'll be able to sustain these salaries, but she wants to pay what they deserve, right? And that's what we need to remember. This is critical work. This is highly skilled work. It requires a knowledge of social and emotional development, cognitive development, physical development, and a lot of stamina and physical energy. Next slide, please. And so we have to consider the affordability and program closures. And with regard to the blueprint and unintended consequences, I wanted to add this slide because if we lose our 3s and 4s to public schools, we cannot stay in business. As you saw, our business model, the 3s and 4s make up for what we don't make with infants and toddlers. So unless there is a robust plan to support our infant toddler, we won't stay open. You're going to lose a lot more than 700 programs. We have to roll this out right. We have to look at the successes of other states and the failures of other states and get it right here. And I put forth that we'd like us all to work together on that to make sure that we can still maintain our diverse women and women of color that own and operate many of these programs and who look like the children that they serve. Next slide, please. And so the childcare shortages, as I said, are really important, and we don't want any more wide scale closures. And I'm afraid that would be something that could happen if we aren't really thoughtful about For example, in some of the webinars I just attended, hiring a certified teacher, we would have to do so and as a community-based diverse delivery or mixed delivery system, but we would have to hire them under the wages that we can offer right now because we can't get the grant money until we have that certified teacher hired. I don't think any certified teacher is going to work for $12 an hour. Probably not. So we don't have an equitable playing field. Next slide, please. And so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that, but we do need a mixed delivery system that's sustainable and that is inclusive. Next slide, please. And so my actions are asked are to ensure that our state leaders, our legislators, and our State Board of Education, because we've talked to some of the State Board of Education members, and they don't even know that childcare is under the purview of MSDE. So we need to have representation, understand the scope of childcare and the crisis that it's in, and also what it lends to the economy and industry and commerce, and that we ensure legislative efforts align in policy and regulations in a timely manner, and that we ensure childcare is respected and recognized as an industry and not an afterthought of public schools. Our ask is for an adequate share of Maryland's allocation of federal funds, and that we, as the state agencies, that they have their necessary funding. MSD needs the money to do the job effectively and efficiently, and that needs to be recognized by the legislature, the governor, and make sure that happens. And then we want to require a robust plan for spending the ARPA money and any more money that we hope to get throughout the next round of Build Back Better, hopefully. And then require maybe, and we'd like to welcome Senator Washington to the OCC Advisory Council. We know that you have accepted that position, and we hope that you'll take some of those minutes and our successes and our collaborative efforts and our concerns to the JCCYF on a regular basis, and then commit to increase sustained funds, not only federal funds, because that's really where most of the money comes from. State funds, we'd like to see you really recognize the importance of childcare and how, and women working, and that's really what all ties together. And an equity and a mixed delivery system as we expand pre-K. Thank you for your time, and I yield to my colleagues who have a lot to say as well in the field. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Chris.
Let me just, before you get started, I just want to say, and I know both of you just always hit hard. You tell the truth. We hear you, and that's why, I mean, I was voluntold to be on the, but I was happy to
put your name in there. We put your name in there. But I would say, and please don't take our advocacy and our passion as being disrespectful. We are partners, as partners of MSDE. We really do love them, and we know how hard they're working. This is not negative. This is just reality.
It's real. You are speaking truth to power. You're speaking truth, and this is a truth that we all hope can finally be heard, because you've been saying it for decades, and it is absolutely true. So, and also more recently, my niece and her wife opened up a childcare facility in Philadelphia, just 2 years ago. So quite great timing. And she inherited from her mother. So there is this intergenerational aspect to it, and looking to what that next generation is going to be is really important. So I'm with you 100%.
And it's concerning if we don't get it right.
Yes. Ms. Daniels, thank you.
Thank you so much, Senator Washington, and I appreciate you joining us in the OCC advisory. That's very nice for you. As you can see, that's MSFCCA. This is our organization. I'm going to be brief. Next slide, please. As you can see, there's a decline. It continues to, family childcare continues to decline, and 609 have closed since the pandemic. And with this downward trajectory, we would like to see some changes. Next slide. And as a result, women are leaving the workforce. According to the Department of Labor, the working women fell by 57,000 from January 2020 to June 2021. With the significant closure of daycare centers, childcare responsibilities have been abruptly placed on women. Next slide. The contributory factor to program closure is right now we have unstable income. A lot of the pandemic has made a lot of us work from home. So there's actually no boundaries to when our work and our home starts. And a lot of the families have been moving from one place to another. Like in my program alone, I've lost a lot of my families because they moved from the city to like urban, rural areas where land and property are cheaper. So it's unstable. Our income can change from one week to another week. So that's also part of the why programs are closing. Another thing is that we lack health insurance and other benefits that, you know, if you work in McDonald's, we can get those. Now, in terms of the health insurance, with the exchange, a lot of us are having a hard time qualifying because they ask for the gross income. However, our salary is our net income. So if there's a way that they can look at us a different lens, like considering our net income as opposed to our gross income, then most probably we could get some health insurance in that way. Another factor is the childcare scholarship. A lot of us have payment delays or non-payment. Some of my providers, some of my members have not been paid since August, and it's November. And there's a lot of factors that lead to that. Sometimes it's, you know, they said they didn't receive the invoices, or it's not properly filled and stuff. So I think it's a system issue that it should be fixed in order for our family childcare to survive. Also, inflation, you know, the prices of food and other stuff has increased. And now some of the sponsors for the food program, like in Baltimore City, they're required to enter their point of service, like their attendance, when it's served. And some of the times the provider don't have, you know, we work by ourselves. We don't have a staff. So we're doing it all and we're having a hard time entering it. And then we don't get paid. And those programs are the ones who are in need of reimbursing their expenses. Next slide. So compensation, you know, in terms of the childcare scholarship rate, should be based on the true market cost versus the current market rate. So, and also we have to address the delays and the non-payment of the childcare scholarship invoices. Now, access and supply building, some of these are just some of my ideas, is to allow expansion to large family home. Right now, we're licensed for 8. And in order for us to expand to a large family home, you know, we have to go through the barriers, which is zoning, fire marshal, and homeowners. Another idea also would be to increase the capacity to 10. Right now we're licensed for 8. So to increase it to 10, and it will align with the blueprint when the universal pre-K rolls out, because the universal pre-K, the staffing is 10-1. If we can increase to 10, we can also ask the providers to have an additional staff. So the ratio would be 10-2 for a program that has the space and the staff. Now this would need a COMAR change. It's just an idea. Next slide. Okay, this is how the Colorado model did their, you know, they addressed this issue on how to expand to a large family home. The act requires the family childcare home to be classified as a residence instead of a commercial for licensure and local regulation. And also they did have a homeowners alignment too. The act allows homeowners in communities, which is called Colorado Common Interest Ownership Act, to allow family childcare home to operate, because that's also one of the barriers that we meet, because even if we meet zoning and fire marshal, we would have pushback from the homeowners association. So, and this is just an idea from the Colorado model. Next slide. Okay, other supply building ideas would be the House Bill 944 from Delegate Solomon, the Growing Family Child Care Opportunities Pilot Program. MSFCCA would like to get involved in planning and implementation of this pilot, and also the possibility of growth by using the existing programs to recruit new programs. Another idea would be to involve the immigrant community, because right now MSFCCA is doing a subset like with the immigrant child care networking. So we want to involve the immigrant community, and we also want to improve the quality of programs for the immigrant community. And next slide. Okay, this is just, it says that, facilities are essential resource for parents and stuff. Next slide. I guess that's it. Thank you so much, everyone.
Great, thank you. Thank you once again. So we have 40 minutes left scheduled for this committee, and I want to make sure that we get to hear all the voices. That's why we packed it so much. So we've had these big overviews, and so I would like if Ms. Clay and Ms. Reyes and Frazier and Richie, if you would do about 5 minutes or less, but and really speak to something we haven't heard. And in particular, we really want to hear specifics around the subsidy and some of the observations that your associations have pointed out. So if you could give specifics and make sure your specifics could be different than the person before, that'll help improve our understanding. So thank you. So Ms. Clay, if you're able to speak, you're the director of Celebrity School of Germantown.
Yes, I am. And if you could please take down my PowerPoint.
Okay.
The prior people have done such an amazing job. You have the data before you. So I'm going to speak specifically on the CCS process, being the director at a center. I've spoken about this before, and I'm glad to be a part of the advocacy for this. And I thank some of you before. I am excited to hear about this portal. It can't come soon enough. So let me just express to you from my side. I have experienced, I think, one of the hardest cases of, I want to use customer service. I know that they're probably understaffed, overworked with the demand of people needing subsidy. So, but here's some few examples. I have totally witnessed where I've had families calling in front of me and cannot get through to the agency. I have had them call on different times, and they speak to different representatives and they get different answers, saying that their case has been expedited and that they will have an answer or a result of their child care subsidy, whether if it's approved and so on and so on. That did not happen. I have seen where one particular family had to lose their job because they could not get the approval fast enough in order for them to have childcare, in order for them to go to work. I have seen where we talked about our staffing, and I hope that whole automatic a staff member having direct access to subsidy would probably happen. I've had to actually be 1 day short of letting go of a staff member who had 2 children in our care who could not afford our tuition without subsidy. And this was a recertification. So she had the child care vouchers or scholarship before. It was a renewal. And for some reason, literally, she was on the phone 3 and 4 times throughout the day, either being on hold or being told it's been expedited. This went on for 2 weeks. Her tuition was over $2,000, which meant she would have had to been responsible for it, whether she left or stayed, and whether if it was approved or not. And so literally, with allowing her to make phone calls while she was caring for kids, fighting for this subsidy, literally, I was telling her, no, you have 24 hours. There's nothing I can do. Either you pay the bill out of pocket, or I'm going to have to let you go, and you are responsible for the tuition. And literally the day that she was supposed to be terminated, she got the approval. You didn't have inconsistencies of such things where some of the subsidy workers will say, oh, we will email you the vouchers because we're in a crisis state of not waiting for it to be mailed. and they get emailed, no problem. Then you have others, no, it won't be emailed, it has to be mailed. And those are days and decisions that make a difference for families as well as for how we can provide care. It's been very stressful. It is high in demand. It is, I offer the documents for our applicants when they come in. Automatically, they know that they need some help. Another inconsistency that I dealt with was that the website was not updated to give accurate information for parents to know whether if they were qualified for it. The other thing, and I don't want to bash a system that is there that has helped many. That's not what I'm trying to do. I'm just pointing out, and if the portal can help, and I saw where it says it tracks the application. Another situation is that we will actually fax in or email the application for the parents. We will verify that everything is in full at the time of submission. I have witnessed to where they say within 30 days they're given a response. It's the parent who calls on the 25th or the 27th day only to be told that their application was denied because they did not have a current pay stub. And we're like, but at the time that we submitted it, everything was current. And yet you're waiting until almost the 30th day to tell them that they're denied. They've been calculating, or they've racked up a bill because they started our children, their children at our center. And now we've been paying out of pocket, hoping that this money would come in, and it's backdated so that it would give the parents the relief. So the timing and the processing of this wonderful program definitely needs to be looked at to help not only to help the families that we serve and the burden, something like that, but also, I've heard about, and I've spoken to, Celebrity has an actual one staff person who works with the processing, things like money that was allocated and the portion of it was over, and the process of sending the money back, or when you get a voucher, not with no explanation of an infant care, all of a sudden has a voucher only for 21 hours. And so it got reduced with no explanation. And the parents like, what happened? And then having to not speak to the same person. I think having a caseworker, someone, again, I don't know if that's possible or not, because I know we serve many, many children or something like that. But it's definitely something that needs to be looked at. Again, I would love to be a part of that public portal to make sure that some of those, kinks in the system are met and that it's an easier process. I think we would have more families that would take the subsidy more, but they talk about government, hassles and stuff like that. It's too much paperwork, so on and so on. You're dealing with different populations that again, and then I actually had asked some of my parents who were very boisterous to me. I had one testimony in my PowerPoint, but I asked for many, and they were like, no, they were scared that they would get retaliated and that their vouchers would be denied because they spoke up about the experience. And I was like, I won't put your name. They said, but they know that you're Celebrity, so they're going to track us down. I'm like, the agency is not like that. So there's that fear of a government system and stuff like that. So I speak on behalf of many, but the program definitely needs work.
Thank you, Ms. Clay, so much. And we're taking these notes. You see my colleagues, and we will collate these and we will get answers and we'll make these systems work better. I'm apologizing on behalf of the state for all of the harrowing experiences that you and others have had. That is, again, very clear that's not everything. There are good things about it, but we're here to make it better. So thank you so much. Thanks for being brave.
You're welcome.
Ms. Reyes, same thing. Add something new, and we'll keep going.
Hi, everybody. For those who don't know me, my name is Carolina Reyes. I'm the director and owner of ARCO. It is Bilingual Children's Center in Laurel, Prince George County. I'm excited to be here because today we met a year ago, and I think somebody said that day that we are the workforce who take care of the workforce. So I am glad that you can hear us again. Obviously, there are many things that we can discuss about how we can improve it, but today we're talking about the child care scholarship. I wrote some things, so now I know that I have shorter time, so I'm gonna try to go to the ones that probably nobody cover or maybe similar situations. And so I have to say that I sadly have seen many of my colleagues closing. You know, it's sad to see why we close. And this is due to COVID. They have brought a lot of burden on us. And I'm gonna give you an example. For instance, I had to close my location and reopen again this year because of COVID. I had a license of 57 children in June, and now I only have 18 children at my center, and I am operating on a loan. That's how I'm paying my teachers, and that is how I'm paying the rent. And the $14 to $21 teacher salaries that I have, I want to maintain because I want to be able to have them, and that way they don't have to go to the public school system. And another part that, you know, I will back up, Tracy, is the extensive and unprecedented delays in providing, you know, working families and single mothers the financial resources needed for their childcare needs. This issue does not affect just families, but also childcare providers, since providers have to wait an extended period of time to obtain the scholarship money. Over and over again, common problems experienced by families and providers who serve them include the lack or the delayed communication, delayed payments to provider. MSD is asking for paperwork to be resent, leading to duplication efforts despite having sent them in the first place. Auditing, now we are doing audits, requesting paperwork for them to be checked, which is taking a long time. And sometimes some providers are receiving the audit information from another center, so they are not knowing that they are going to have an audit because the audits are wrong. And also a deep and profound misunderstanding by the families on how to correctly apply for the scholarship. Many of them don't know. Please, I invite you to call the 1-800 number today, and you can see how difficult it is for us to be able to talk with a human being. If you are a person who don't understand how to apply, especially for my immigrant community, which I'm an immigrant, and many of them do not know English, it is difficult. It is hard for someone to have. That's what I suggested, to maybe have more family centers to specifically guide our parents on how to apply for scholarship subsidies, or how to apply even for kindergarten. Many of our immigrant communities do not know how to do this. I want to give this example. MSD is supporting families, but many times, specifically single mothers, they cannot collect the necessary child support due to the domestic abuse concerns. I have heard that firsthand here. This last concern is serious. It's a serious one because many families with an undocumented status often cannot utilize or safely rely on the court system to collect child support. I'm also a member of the Latino Childcare Association, and we have heard from our family childcare providers and center providers that a lot of the families who are undocumented, they are afraid to apply to the system because they feel that they won't be able to get a legal status later on when they want to apply for it. Since the state of Maryland has cut the unemployment benefits and children are returning to an in-person schooling, it is now, I will say it again and loud, that the preceding time ever to resolve this issue. Although the state has increased the income levels for the childcare scholarship, I have seen firsthand the extensive delays and answering working families and single mothers about this issue, and they need to re-enter the workforce now. I have a few suggestions which I believe it could be initial solution to resolve this issue. I have shared this with MSDE leadership already and other entities, and I am fully aware that they are actively pursuing the similar goals and are strong advocates for families in Maryland. But since I am a hard-headed person, and as my husband called me, the squeakiest of wheels, I am presenting these suggestions again to this committee. First, create a video showing step-by-step of how to correctly apply for a scholarship. This video should be in English or in Spanish or any other language, as well as since MSD is already providing 11 different languages for application. So So that would be something helpful since we don't have many family centers to be able to help the families. I also create a frequently asked questions related to the scholarship process. This should be written in clear and plain language. I recognize that some of the FAQs may already exist, but there are many cases of diverse situations which may not be covered, such as the issues of domestic abuse and the lack of court orders, child support, and again, this should be published in multiple languages. Third, have a toll-free number that is much more efficient and guarantees human interactions in a speedy manner for families and providers. The current toll-free number directs and redirects families to oftentimes incorrect areas, which often contradict each other. No, call this number. Oh, no, email to this address. And many times, families get callbacks during working hours or other times, which make it difficult to speak over the phone. Fourth, ensure payments of invoices on days in which centers have to close due to COVID-19. In many occasions, some centers have to close because of COVID cases. And on these particular days, the current scholarship rules do not pay for excess of absences. And I'm gonna say this, they have paid, but I have no centers who had to close. I believe it was a month. It was one classroom first, then another classroom then, and then when it's too many of absences, they don't get paid. And fifth, have MSD utilize providers as a teaching tool for families applying for the scholarship. Teach us. We are here to help you and support our families. If MSD train us on how to correctly apply for the scholarship, then we will be useful and able to bridge between the families in need and the application process. Learn from other states which efficiently proceed these kinds of stipends for working families. For example, I had a family who moved from Pennsylvania, which according to them, the process application, it took them 2 weeks period. Compare this to 1 month in Maryland, which has for fewer families in need. I am saying that I understand that all the entities in MSDE have 30 days to process any type. This is go to licensing, to Maryland credential, or to childcare scholarship. I'm gonna be honest with you. I don't know if this is because they are shorter for staff or they are really just taking a whole month to be able to process, documentation. And right now for our families, a big burden. They need to start working now. And many times they do not have a support who can take care of their children. And they are not able to cover the full tuition that we are asking right now. I hope that most of all of these suggestions can be taken to heart and act upon, and not just lip service, so that we all can be better serve our communities. I know that the community of providers is willing to assist MSDE in many ways. We are here to work together, but we need your help because it's truly, and it's exhausting and frustrating to face a systematic problem that should not exist at all. These issues, as stated, can be resolved. I am here as a voice for the community of providers to improve the system for everyone and not simply to be a burden to MSDE. So thank you so much.
So as always, thank you. Thank you so much. Those recommendations are right on. Again, we are writing them down. We will see Senator Benson is nodding, Delegate Krebs, everybody is hearing you. We're not doing lip service. We promise you that. So to also hear from the rural perspective as well, would be Ms. Holly Frazier and Ms. Kim Ritchie. So are both here? I see
Yes.
Holly, great. Oh, you're the owner of my favorite place. So thank you for joining us today.
Well, I'm going to go first. Yeah, I will first.
Okay.
Holly and I are both from Western Maryland. I am Kim Ritchie Headley, and I am the owner and administrator of Ritchie's Tot Lot in Washington County. That's in Western Maryland. I've been in business for 22 years. I'm going to agree with Tracy and Carolina on everything they said. And I really feel I need to squash my passion a little because I need like 4 or 5 hours to talk to you people on everything that's going on. But I'm just going to say that I do have my bachelor's degree and I have taught in the public schools. And when my daughter was born with some medical needs, I went into childcare and started as a family provider and opened a center. Now I've been in business for 22 years. The Tot Lot is accredited through MSDE and we are a level 5 excels. We did stay open the whole entire time, Holly and I both, during COVID. We are actually, it's funny because we're actually rival centers. We were right next to each other. And if we hadn't gotten together, we wouldn't have survived COVID. I will tell you that right now. We stayed open during it, giving care for essential personnel through the EPIC program. The biggest thing for that was payment of funds. We provided care for 6 or 7 weeks before we ever got payment. The day that actually payment came, our first check was the day I was closing. I couldn't afford, I had drained my entire savings. And I asked my girls, you can either hold your checks till Monday, maybe the check will come next week. And thank God that it came that Friday or I would have closed my doors. During that time, pre-COVID, the Tot Lot was serving 83 to 86 children every day. I had a wait list for every single classroom. And now we're serving 48 to 50 children every day. And I do not have a wait list at all. I think we have 2 on our infant list right now that we can't get in. I don't know where all the kids are, but it's of all the 16 or 17 centers in Washington County, we all are operating at 50% or below in capacity. And I know that because I'm the president for MSCCA in Washington County, and I speak to all of the directors weekly. We speak all the time. And actually COVID had brought all of our directors together. It was actually a good thing for us. The PPP loan was actually between that and the finally getting our funds from MSDE paid. That is what kept our doors open because of our diminished capacity. At that time, I could only have 27 children in my whole center instead of my 86 during COVID. And because of that financial loss for those many, many months, we are still trying to recover from that. I will tell you, Holly's going to talk. I gave her, her and I made our talking points, but she will agree. This is our worst and hardest season of my career in childcare. Some days you just don't know that you can go on just waiting for payments and all the different rules and regulations being put on us. And I understand that they feel it's good, but workforce shortage it's on us and it is really bad. And I'm going to let Holly talk about that. And she'll have to squash her passion here a little too, or we will run over. Go for it, Holly.
Hi, my name is Holly Frazier. I am a childcare owner right here in Smithsburg, Maryland. Just like Kim said, I actually own 2 centers here. My pre-COVID numbers was about 150 kids daily. Now we're sitting around 118. I got a couple different ideas and reasons for why the numbers are low. And we'll get to that. But I did remain open at both centers the entire time. We have never closed. Closing was never an option to me. When everyone was folding up shop all around us and going home, I had to be here. I had to be here for my families. I had to be here for my kids. I'm not going to get emotional, but it wasn't an option. It was never an option to close our doors. The thought never crossed my mind. When people would say to me, I can't believe you're still open, I got really upset. Well, of course I'm still open. I have kids that need me. We were their meals for some. We were maybe the only hug they got every day. So closing was never an option, and we did whatever we had to do to remain open. And closing is still not an option for me. It's not going to be who I am ever. I also participate in Maryland Excels. I have my degree in business as well as my degree in early childhood education. I will say this last year, though, even with that business background and that business brain, and I did budgets for big corporations and I know how to work money and move money, but PPP loan and the grants that we received kept us going, kept us flowing here at both of our centers. So what are our current problems? I want to go back to a question that was asked by, I believe her name was Miss King. Not sure if she's a Senate or a delegate, so I apologize on that. But she said about the opening and the licensing problem, and she said not to lower standards. No, we never want to lower standards, and I agree with you wholeheartedly. But what was not disclosed is that now we're raising standards. I'm not sure if anybody's aware here or not, but MSCE is now putting on some more to us. Instead of saying, hey, we're in the middle of a pandemic, let's keep things how they are, let's help them, or let's back up a little bit. No. They said, now, hey, what's coming down the pike? I went to a leadership symposium. First time I walked away from one of those in my 10 years, feeling defeated and deflated, because all I heard at the symposium was what was coming to me, what else I was going to have to do, what requirements I was going to add on to my staff. We cannot get qualified staff, new staff. Of course, we have our old staff. We're all within ratio and compliances and all that stuff. But to find new staff coming in the doors, we can't find new staff that are qualified. And now MSCE is saying, oh, now they're going to have a CDA or higher. The 90-hour clock course isn't going to work anymore. So instead of laxing up or helping or keeping things the same, they're piling on. We are not going to be able to find staff to work for the wages that childcare makes, but continuing to add to what their requirements are. So they roll out, well, we'll pay for it. The state of Maryland from the childcare funds are going to pay for employees to receive their CDA. Great, wonderful. There's no service commitment. There's no nothing. So the state of Maryland, through the childcare funds, are going to pay for individuals to get their CDA. What are they going to do? They're going to leave. Now they have the education, the training in their back pocket, and they're leaving the childcare field, and they're going to go to the public schools. They're going to go to the public schools because we cannot compete with the benefits package that they provide. We cannot compete with the hourly wage that they provide. But who got them where they needed to go? The childcare industry trained them. The childcare industry got them their education, and then they left. Why? There was no service commitment. There was no reason for them to stay. So to go back to why our numbers are low, there's a couple of reasons. Number one, families are still scared of COVID. Let's just state the obvious. A lot of parents, if they have the option to be home or with family, that's what they're going to choose. They want that for that safety. The other thing is health department. I heard Stephen Hicks did hit on what the steps are when you get a reported case. So I will table back to that and help you understand that. What he said was true, and that is the process. But today is Wednesday. I'm going to call the health department and I'm going to say, hi, this is Holly's My Favorite Place. I have a confirmed COVID case. I'm going to lay out all the facts to them. I'm going to give them everything, and they're going to give me my answer. They're going to say, you need to close down that classroom, and anybody that was around that child for longer than 15 minutes, closer than 6 feet, without a mask on, they have to quarantine for 14 days. Great. Okay. Thank you. We go. We do that. We handle that. Public school. That same kid was in a public school building. They call the local health department. They say, as long as you are not having any signs or symptoms, you can continue. It's not the same across the board. So what are parents doing? They're leaving. They're going to the neighbor down the street. The aunt's now watching, or they're getting their kids in public school programs, even if that's not where they want them to be, because they don't have to quarantine. They don't have to isolate. Their requirements are so much different than childcare. So that is our struggles. That's why our numbers are low. Parents are either scared of the COVID, or they're over it, and they're over the restrictions that childcare has to follow, because nobody else has to follow what we follow. Nobody else. Name a business that is not having to do the same things that we're doing. It's not there. The local schools are not doing it.
I'm going to interrupt and just say thank you so much. We have 5 more people to hear from and 10 and a half minutes.
Oh, perfect. Thank you.
But thank you very much.
Kim, you go ahead, wrap it up. I'm going to mute myself.
Yeah, so Delegate Kelly, I was wondering if we could jump maybe to the policy recommendations, make sure we get that, and ask Laura and Jennifer to be really quick with that, because we know that our businesses are going to say a lot of what was said, but I want you to be able to say it, but I'm wondering, could we do that? Could we jump to number 5, versus presentations on policy?
What, can we check with staff? Is it possible, staff, for us to go over 10 minutes, or are we not able to do that today?
I didn't know if other people had meetings.
It's up to your discretion, I believe, but
okay, great. If everybody can hold, then let's roll as we
just because we have the presenters here and might as well, but briefly, right?
Very briefly. like me too. All right, so I was ridden on that one, but that's good. I'm good with it. That's why. Yeah, so now we're going to hear from our business and nonprofit communities that are going to tell us, what we know, and certainly what we've learned over the last 2 years about the importance, of childcare. And so we have Ms. Locklear from Maryland Retailers. It's nice to see you in this space. I appreciate it. And then we're going to hear from Montgomery moving forward from 2 people, or maybe they can decide that they have a single presentation for the project director and the chief government relations officer. Ms. Locklear.
I will be quick. So honorable members of the committee, thank you so much for inviting me to provide some comments today. I have not had an opportunity to participate in this space, and I'm really looking forward to doing so moving forward. So for the record, my name is Kaylee Locklear, and I'm here on behalf of the Maryland Retailers Association. Obviously, our industry and many in the business community have been drastically impacted by workforce shortages. And COVID has really brought into focus the decline of women in the workplace and childcare challenges that exist for us. And I'm listening to all the testimony earlier. Stephen Hicks from MSDE, he covered a lot of the federal funding that's come down through the states, such as Child Care Stabilization and the Development Fund. There's quite a bit of money that's left there. But there are just so many opportunities as we move forward. And I just want to make it clear that we are glad to partner to help where it makes sense. I really wanted to be sure because the ABLE Foundation could not be here today. And I know so many of the advocate groups worked with them on the report that came out, but that is truly what caught my attention and where I decided to go to my board and say, you know what, we need to start participating in this space and get involved. And I'll put that report in the chat box, but it really looked at, funding access to childcare in Maryland, and it made, I think, pretty meaningful policy recommendations to rectify inequity, some of which were touched on earlier, but again, I'll put that there so you guys can all just take a look at it. The one thing I did really want to share with everybody that I think is, Senator Washington, I know you're looking for outside the box. I do think there's a great model to better include the business community in Maryland. And our neighbors have taken a unique approach to addressing childcare issues by involving the business community. So the Delaware Chamber of Commerce recently entered into a partnership with the Federal Reserve Bank of Philadelphia, Rodell, and then the Delaware Office of Early Learning, similar to MSDE, and they are launching a research and action lab to educate the Delaware business community on the economic importance of the child care sector. And so the goal of that partnership is to develop and refine a toolkit for the business community to inform, to equip, and support employers and their employees about the community's child care needs. So I will, like I said, keep it very brief. I am in constant touch with the head of the chamber there as I'm really looking forward to seeing what that looks like. I'd love to bring that back to you, but I think it's an innovative way for the rest of the business sector who's being impacted by childcare issues and workforce shortages to get involved in this space. So I thank you all very much for your time today.
Thank you, and welcome aboard. So next, Sharon Friedman, Montgomery moving forward. Is that who we?
Chair?
Yes.
Chair Washington?
Yeah.
It's Susan Madden here.
Yeah, it's for Susan.
Thank you for putting up our slide deck.
Okay.
In the interest of time, I'm going to talk incredibly fast and really give Sharon the bulk of our few minutes to talk. I think it's really apropos that we just followed the Maryland Retailers, and you'll hear why in a minute. So let me just say, my day job is with Montgomery College, but my passion and I guess my night job is MMF, and I'm one of the co-chairs of MMF. The other two co-chairs represent the business community and our nonprofit sector in Montgomery County. And I know this committee is very familiar with that old African proverb, it takes a village to raise a child. And the nonprofit community understands that deeply and realized in trying to tackle the challenges our community faces today, that the nonprofit sector couldn't do it alone. Just like the providers can't solve our childcare problems in Maryland alone. And so we came together and created MMF, and we used the collective impact model. And succinctly put, we learned very quickly, or we assume at the outset, that no one sector of our community can solve a problem. And in particular with childcare, we said, this is not a mom problem. This is not a provider problem. It's not a government problem. It's not a philanthropy problem. It's not an employer's problem. It's the village's problem. And the entire village has to come together to solve it. So instead, we all came to learn, we all came together to learn together, look at data, and use systems thinking to find solutions. And so to Kaylee's point, we had employers at the table, which was an integral part to our discussion. So in other words, key to our work is equity and inclusion principles, cross-sector engagement. That means business leaders and philanthropists at the table defining and crafting solutions. It also means deep community engagement with the members of the community who are impacted by the particular problem and potential solutions, meaning parents and providers are integral partners in the process of defining the right solutions. And in this case, it's the issues of childcare, which we all know it's not childcare anymore, it's early care and education. And with that, I will just say that we did a lot of work with our employer partners, and we know that billions and billions are lost every year out of the Maryland economy and out of employer pockets as a result of lack of access to childcare. We also know that this isn't just a family problem, it's an economic problem. We learned that through all of our deliberations and educational opportunities we provided the community and ourselves. We know employers need workers they can count on every day. You've heard that from providers, you've heard that from the Retail Association, so that they can be productive and grow. And our economy needs talent, and we must grow it today to fill the jobs of tomorrow. So let me just say, you have our slide deck. You can see all of our conclusions. We stand ready to help you move Maryland forward in addition to Montgomery County. And now I'm going to let Sharon talk to you about a couple of elements of our call to actions, the steps that we think make sense to advance access to early care and education birth to 5, one of which is a toolkit for employers. So with that, I'll be quiet and let Sharon talk.
Yeah, and I'll be brief as well. And please, once you have a chance to look at the slide deck, if you have any questions for Susan or I, happy to follow up. So we innovated with this cross-sector group 4 years ago, an early care and education call to action. And within the framework of that call to action, there were any number of system enhancement steps, action steps that we all felt we had a part in trying to innovate. One of them was an employer toolkit. So Kelly, we'd be more than happy to share the online resource that we developed in a system-wide way with the input of employers, in particular HR managers, that allows employers and employees to access important information about early care and education. Over the course of our work in early care and education over the last 4 years, we've been very lucky because Montgomery County has made some significant investments through our county executive and county council in early care and education. But our emphasis has been on breaking down silos and bringing together systems of folks so that we're all working together towards the same goal. And our call to action, we think, has helped bring together folks so we're all working towards the same kinds of activities and innovations. Now, we've done this through having cross-sector symposiums and learning opportunities. We piloted with the support of the local Department of Health and Human Services, a system-wide program called The Basics, which is a child development innovation that's also being utilized and innovated in Calvert County and Howard County. And we've done any number of other advocacy initiatives, but all in a cross-sector way. And I want to emphasize that because so many of the folks that are on this call today, we have learned from. We have been part of advocacy efforts with Chris and with Ruby and with Laura and with so many of the rest of you in the form of an early care and education workforce advocacy coalition that Montgomery Moving Forward has innovated and pushed for county, state, and federal funding, and in particular around workforce issues in the last several years. And then the last thing that I'll enunciate that was a hallmark and central point to our call to action is something that we've referred to as an early care and education coordinating entity. Again, we take nothing away from the fabulous work that's being done by all of the sectors that have been heard from today and mentioned today, but we thought that it would really be good if a public-private entity could come into existence that would allow public sector folks and private sector folks, public sector government, private sector providers, parents, philanthropy, nonprofits to be at the table working from a common agenda. And so yesterday, the Montgomery County Council unanimously introduced legislation for the establishment of a nonprofit entity to become the public-private early care and education coordinating entity in Montgomery County. Testimony on that entity will be held at the end of November, and we will see how it progresses. And this is really important. The council's legislation is wonderful, and we like to think that MMF played a little part in helping to fashion the legislation, because we literally talked to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of community stakeholders to get feedback on what they thought an entity should look like. And we incorporated that feedback into a report that we offered to the council about a year ago. So let me just stop right there because I know that there are others who have important things to say as well.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for this group or comments? I just have a quick question just on the board that they just voted on. Is there a relationship, Ms. Friedman, or what is the relationship of this entity to the local management boards and the COCs? Like how?
That's a very good question, Senator. The continuity, if you will, and working together of not only the new entity that, if it comes into existence, will be, but specifically we do speak to the importance of our local management board, which is a collaboration council, and the early care and education, the ECCC, which is our early childhood coordinating council, or the ECAC. We want to make sure that everybody who has particular expertise and particular activities are part of a continuum of services that the entity keeps a 360-degree view of. So if you think about the entity, if it comes into existence, as the neutral convener, neutral facilitator with a 360-degree view, then the collaboration council or the local management board and the ECCC have a very, very important part in that continuum.
Okay, thank you. Intriguing. So next, we will hear from the Maryland Family Network and the Montgomery County Early Child Care Support Services. So maybe you might be able to answer my question around that. And we're going to talk about some policy recommendations and solutions.
Okay, hi, I'm Laura Wheeldryer. I'm the Executive Director of Maryland Family Network, and thanks so much for having us here today. I know time is really short and you don't need me to talk about the issues because you've heard them directly from the field themselves. So I want to jump right into what I think is the opportunity here. There are some real policy pieces coming together. So even though everything we've heard today is pretty bleak about the state of childcare in Maryland and truly nationally, I want to also situate this in a policy opportunity. There are all these pieces moving right now that could produce seismic change for parents, for families, for children, for providers. First of all, there is Build Back Better at the federal level. And while we don't know exactly what will be happening with that, I don't think there's any doubt that pre-K expansion money from the federal government is on the horizon in some form or another. You also have the blueprint in Maryland that is backing down to the age of 3 through a diverse delivery system, which has, while still challenges to iron out, a lot of possibility and opportunity for childcare as well. There has been this amazing expansion through your hard work of childcare scholarship in Maryland. MSD expanded eligibility for families. You all expanded the reimbursement rates. And now we're getting a bubbling up of other national and local ideas about how childcare subsidy or scholarship could be more effective and efficient. We're right on the precipice of childcare for all, or some version of universal childcare that we basically just need to back into for 0 to 3-year-olds. So we have this intertwined set of complex policy factors and issues. There is no one policy that is going to solve these. Jennifer Arnaiz is going to speak next about a piece of pipeline work called Growing Opportunities for Family Childcare. We have advocated and made some moves toward putting business sustainability supports into the Child Care Resource Center network that Maryland Family Network oversees. There is obviously money being devoted at the state into professional development that supports a robust pipeline. We need healthcare benefits for our providers. There's a policy solution. You've heard a ton of things today about how childcare subsidy or scholarship can be made more effective. Some states have turnaround time mandates about when families need to hear, which you've heard lots of pain around that. But I would like to suggest presumptive eligibility for families under the circumstances we're living under right now, where you have heard this confluence of employers, providers, and parents saying the system isn't working for them. These are the kind of bold steps that could be taken in fairly short order to really change the system. And, I'm going to leave you with what you already know, which is when the system doesn't work for parents or providers, it is also clearly not working for kids. So thank you so much. Appreciate the time.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Laura. Thank you, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Jennifer Arnaiz, and I'm from Montgomery County Department of Health and Human Services, and I oversee child care support services in our jurisdiction. So today I was asked to share an overview of our initiative, Growing Opportunities in Family Childcare. I'll try to be as brief as possible. In 2018, as part of our county's early care and education initiative, we were charged with increasing the number of registered family childcare providers in Montgomery County, as well as supporting existing registered providers in meeting quality benchmarks. So I'm going to speak to the recruitment portion for today. Next slide, please. Availability of safe and high quality childcare options is paramount to us in Montgomery County. We've experienced a 23% decline in licensed or registered family childcare providers over the past 10 years, with significant deserts in 5 specific zip codes. At this time, over the past 10 years, population has grown by 10%, and we've actually are now over 1 million residents in Montgomery County, which has also increased the number of children birthed for by 5%. So our county's response is to increase the availability of regulated childcare to not only support working families, but also have more options that are rooted in family choice. Our overall goal is to create a model or system to recruit and support family childcare providers. We focused on 4 specific objectives, which are outlined here: increasing the number of family childcare providers by 50 each year, targeting our 5 zip codes as well as Title I catchments, and continue to support our newly licensed family childcare with quality through the standard that we've set forth is Maryland Excels, levels 3, 4, and 5, and business sustainability through coaching, mentoring, and training. Next slide, please. So to fully implement our model, we spent time evaluating our unique county needs, understanding our diverse population, reviewing data, and more importantly, talking to our providers. We know through the work with the Child Care Resource Center network, which sits in our program, that we need to have a strong relationship with the community. We know that anything that we do forward with them is going to require a positive relationship and trust. Our model includes identified staff to provide programmatic supports and professional development, collaboration with our local associations, both the Family Child Care Association of Montgomery County and the Latino Child Care Association of Maryland. We ask our associations to provide us with mentors or our ambassadors to provide peer support and guidance. And we also have a contract with the Maryland Women's Business Center for consultation and technical assistance on business development, record keeping, and marketing. I want to stress the importance of the business counselor. We recognize the unique considerations in family child care and the necessary expertise needed to combine business consultation and financial planning. The reality is that family child care has never been really considered a small business. It's been considered babysitting. But as entrepreneurs, by many of our Black and Brown women in our community, we want to give them the same considerations as other businesses. Next slide, please. So as you can see, we have some systematic approach to what we're doing. We have dedicated staff, key partnerships, and collaborations. We can skip this. Next slide. So our efforts really are based on 4 different parts. The work that we do not only shortens the licensure process, but creates a more linear or stackable approach for opening up a family childcare business. In the past, it could take someone anywhere between 9 months to a year to obtain their family childcare registration. With us, we can do it in 4 months. Our model consists of targeting goals on singular focus and creating specific order to ensure success. Month 1 is all about the relationship building and assessing the needs of the potential provider. Month 2 focuses on the various aspects of establishing a small business. Month 3 concentrates on setting up the environment to offer a high quality learning experience and care. And the final month wraps up all loose ends and supports the provider through the final inspection as they launch their new business. Next slide. A few highlights to showcase the work that we have done in Montgomery County and the success that we've had in our approach. We surpassed our benchmark of 50 newly registered homes, with 43% are within our 2 targeted groups. We've begun the process of moving to high quality childcare, again defined as published in Maryland Excels levels 3, 4, and 5, as well as placing providers on a professional development pathway through the Maryland Child Care Credential. We encourage them to pursue intentional coursework that leads them to a variety of points on the spectrum, anywhere from child development credentials to obtaining a degree through higher education opportunities. The one area where we have felt the effects of the pandemic have been the sustainability portion. While 96% of our programs in Montgomery County have reopened, programs continue to struggle with low enrollment. Our GoFCC programs are averaging about 30% enrollment. And as you know, that is not a way to sustain a business. We recognize that many families turn to Family, Friend, and Neighbor, also known as FFN, when programs were forced to close on the onset of the pandemic. Then they reopened with reduced capacity, all while families were still struggling with job loss and change. Many turned to the FFN care as the only option that addressed the cost of care, flexible schedules, and changing family dynamics and health concerns during this massive World Health event. Our mission now is to continue to support our established GoFCC participants and infuse new business approaches by pivoting on marketing strategies which showcase to parents the access and affordability options when choosing regulated childcare. We are currently exploring business tools that will support this objective. Any questions?
Great. No, thank you. Thank you. I want to thank I'll just start, but I just want to thank everyone for presenting. I specifically want to thank Holly and Kim for your passion and everyone on this meeting today. We care. These are important issues. It's taken way too long, but it is because of your passion and care that we are here today, and that so many of our children have safe places where they can learn and their parents can feel comfortable and go to work and provide. So we do recognize the work you do, and it is our commitment to lifting that up. And now with our partnership with the business community and almost every institution in this state, I look forward to not only what we can do this year, but what we'll be doing in the coming years. Delegate Kelly, do you want to carry us to the next part and wrap us up?
Okay, well, it is 3:14, so we were going to do a roundtable discussion among joint committee members. Shall we put the pin in that and pick that up at the next meeting? Yeah. Okay, so just so members know, we were originally scheduled to meet on December 7th, but that is during the special session. So we will be scheduling our final meeting soon, likely within a week of the original date, hopefully. So you should be hearing about that officially soon. And at the final meeting, we will be discussing specific recommendations. It looks as though Senator Benson has a question. And Delegate Krebs as well. Senator Benson.
I don't have a question, but I do have, I'm an educator, so I really feel very strongly about what I'm about to say. We have to do more for our providers. When I heard the testimony of the providers from Washington County, and the fact that we are making all of these requirements, they have to be degrees, they have to go to school. And then when you look at how much they're paid, and you are wondering why we cannot keep providers, and they can go to Starbucks and other stores, I would hope that this committee, if we do nothing else, that we take a hard look at the pay that's imposed on these people, their budget. We have all of this money coming into the great state of Maryland, and I'm just trying to figure out why isn't it that we aren't utilizing where it belongs? And that's to ensure that every child in the great state of Maryland has a healthy start. And that healthy start in most cases began with these wonderful providers. I'm going to spend a whole lot of time talking about that, but I want us to be real serious when we talk about pay, qualifications, and then the State Board of Education is getting ready to impose something else on these people. I hope that we're serious about our roundtable discussion and the recommendation will reflect what I've just said.
Thank you, Senator Benson. And I couldn't, you couldn't have said it better, but I think Chair Washington and I both would like all the members to come to the next meeting with some really substantive ideas so we can have a conversation about what we can do for these providers because of what they're doing for our kids. Delegate Krebs.
Thank you. I agree with Senator Benson, but there's some low-hanging fruit here that I think the department needs to come back to us with. A lot of it's customer service and accountability. So I'd ask for our roundtable next time, can we put them on the agenda and let's give this the adequate time that it deserves and ask them to follow up on this list? I mean, I have pages and pages of notes, and I'm sure that they do too. But instead of us having a roundtable and then them getting back to us, have them get back to us with action items that they're going to do quickly, short-term, mid-term, long-term budget up, and then we can have a discussion based on, I mean, I'm hoping half this stuff gets ticked off the list because it's been brought to their attention. And then they can report back, then we can have a discussion and say, okay, here we go from here, but I don't want to keep delaying this. So that's my suggestion, to give them a little homework to do. Well, now that it's been brought to their attention, I'm sure that they can take it back and improve many of these things in the short term.
I see that Stephen Hicks is still on the call. Stephen, are you still here? Can you respond to that? Would you be able to join us for the next meeting with some follow-up to some of the issues that were raised today?
I am sure that we could arrange that, yes. And if you want to send additional information, I did take lots of copious notes, of course. And of course, these are all concerns that we have heard and we are working to address, especially as we streamline the application process through the portal for families and also through the reimbursement process for providers. But absolutely, and if there's any additional information or questions that you can send ahead of time with enough time to really research those and respond with this suggestion of short-term goals, medium goals, and long-term goals, we'd love to tackle that.
I mean, I'm just going to give you a quick example. They talked about workflow and never talking to the same person. I mean, obviously, that's a problem. It's a problem. You never talk to a human being. So, how do you just solve one issue of getting someone assigned to a person, having a case and getting it closed? I know Governor Hogan, for many of the boards and commissions, they have customer satisfaction at the bottom of the email. So people can say, okay, this person took care of my issue or not. So that's the kind of stuff that I call short term that can be corrected with just workflows and bringing it to the attention of your staff. How do we improve this process? Because the customer it's not working for them. And you and I've been, I mean, I've had lots of discussions with your department too about specific challenges, and they need to be addressed. And I think, you know, COVID was a difficult time, but we need to learn from COVID, and there's got to be a way to handle these inquiries from our customers. So that's what I'm talking. That to me is short term, just reorganizing your processes and getting people accountable for the work that they're doing.
I agree, Delegate Krebs, and I think more specifically, we'll ask our committee members, our committee staff, to collate these and organize them, and we will send Mr. Hicks and the secretary, the superintendent as well, CC him these specific issues. And I think we what we're expecting at our next meeting is a corrective action plan, like a very specifically what you've done and what you intend to do to address these. Would that be correct, Delegate Krebs? That you would?
Yes, and then what do we need to do as a legislature? Like if there's things that you can't do, we need to know before session starts. Here are the things that your hands are tied if we need to act on something. So we have a to-do list too from you if that's necessary.
And so I know Delegate Solomon has a question too. Before we get to his question, let me just remind the committee then, we will, if you have specific questions you want to follow up with MSDE, send them to us. We'll have the committee staff work on a long list of questions that we can get answered in time for our next meeting. It'll be very similar to what we prepared for the long-term care meeting that we did last month, so that then at the following meeting, we can have the answers to all of the questions to both long-term care and childcare before we make our recommendations. Delegate Solomon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Stephen, I guess one of the other questions that we didn't really get a chance to talk about before, and it's come up a little bit, is just on simplification of the application. And you mentioned this with the portal, but I will say, you know, I was going through it the other day. I have a master's degree and have worked in this field. It's incredibly confusing. And I know a lot of the stuff on there is, you know, federal requirement, but as, you know, sort of the federal government did with the FAFSA form, I mean, they literally sat down and figured out what does every question on the form correspond to in terms of policy. I know there was a JCR report on, it was primarily led with DHS around simplifying applications and streamlining applications between, you know, I know cash assistance and a couple other programs give you automatic access to childcare, but I don't know if we'll be able to do this in the next 30 days, but I think it would be a wonderful exercise and probably is not required, wouldn't require a bill, maybe some of the changes would, how we can eliminate questions on the form, how we can streamline it and really make it a much easier process. And I am fully in favor of Laura's comment of presumptive eligibility, but any information you have on streamlining the form or what's already being done in the portal, I think would be really helpful. Thank you, Delegate Kelly.
I was muted. Senator Washington, do you want to close out the meeting?
So we are officially over. I don't have a gavel, but thank you all for coming and see you next time.